Do you have a jar of pickles in your refrigerator or just at your house or where you live? The only reason I ask is because it's going to be relevant to today's topic about personal branding. And in my mind, personal branding is a lot like trying to read a label on the outside of the pickle jar, you being the pickle jar in this instance. Because personal branding, a lot of it comes down to the kind of impression that you leave on people. What people think of you, think of when they see you, what kind of people you hang out with, your personality, your tonality, your language, skills or niche areas of knowledge that you just happen to know a lot about. These are just a few different contributing factors for what can make up your personal brand and what makes you unique. And that's really the part that we're going to be leaning into today, which is that unique part, especially these one-liners, and I'll be talking about this in a second. But the thing about marketing, if there's anything that I've learned, is that it's really just a blend of psychology and emotional intelligence. And if you tack a little bit of self-awareness on top of that, it's like pristine. Now, the first instance in which you may have experienced a little bit of personal branding is when you're going in for a job. If you're wanting to get hired at some place, they call you in for an interview, even just a phone interview, and they ask the inevitable question of, why should we hire you? That is a great opportunity for you to practice that self-awareness, that psychology, and that emotional intelligence. You have to be prepared enough, at least in that particular context, to say what value you would bring to the company or to the role or to the culture of the workplace. My whole background is in education. This is what I was planning on doing for my life. I thought I was going to do it for the next 30 years. I have 2 degrees in education. All of my professional credentials have been oriented around education, but I really don't use it anymore. And that was my first experience next to, trying to get a job, where I had to exercise some of that personal branding skills. Whether you're in business with yourself, whether you are just trying to get a job with someone else, you have to know what makes you stand out, what makes you unique, what are your qualifications, what is your personal life experience, who do you know in your network? These are all really great questions. The most literal instance in which I had to pitch something new or unique about myself was when I was heavily oriented, more so than now, in the book space. If you look at my past content, a whole slew of it is about books. And I still do talk about that. My scope has just broadened a little bit because people don't realize when you write a book, you're going into business with yourself because you want to see success from it. You want to make money off of it. You want to build a following from it. We're kind of getting into more of the entrepreneurial space. But before I digress, the thing that you have to know, if you're writing a book, if you're launching a podcast, if you're wanting to have any kind of creative outlet, to get anyone to listen, or if people just even ask, so what's your book about? So what's your podcast about? You have to know how to describe it in 1-2 sentences max in a way that's really going to get people's attention. Self-awareness, psychology, and emotional intelligence. And when I was writing my book, which is back here, it's a few years old. I think it will be this June. It's called The Finer Things Club. And the way that I used to pitch it to people, especially when I was trying to get it published, is I would say it's a coming of age memoir about my experience living and working in Yellowstone National Park as a young adult. It's a mouthful, but I was able to get it out in 1 sentence. And generally the response that I would get from people would be, oh, wow, that's cool. There would be this sudden curiosity or intrigue for it. And then there'd be maybe a couple follow-up questions about, oh, so is it out? Where can I buy it? Oh, hey, that's really cool. I'd love to get something like that for my niece. So those are the kinds of reactions that you're going for. Anything that you can describe in 1 sentence is a really, really great way to convey what is unique about you or the thing or the service, the product, whatever that you're pushing out, that you're launching, that you're wanting to get more attention on, that you're wanting to monetize. So recently I attended this creative business conference in the downtown Chicago area called Creative Con. My friend Julie was hosting it. She's awesome. Go check out her podcast. It's called Obsessed. She was hosting this conference and I brought my mom to it because my mom's a business owner and I thought she could, benefit from it. And I realized that as I was pulling her aside and kind of briefly describing who all these people were that were speaking, that were just attending, I realized that I was describing them in these 1-sentence descriptions that just basically encapsulated who they were. One example is I pulled her aside and I was like, oh, our keynote speaker, that's the guy that they based the Jerry Maguire movie off of featuring Tom Cruise. Oh, that girl over there, she's got a really interesting story. She actually married her liver donor and then they made a Hallmark movie about it and then it ended up being the most watched Hallmark movie out there or something like that. And then I was like, holy cow. There are some really cool people. Oh, that guy, yeah, he's an admiral. He worked in the White House and It's one of those things that has the same reaction as that book that I mentioned, the little pitch for my book that makes people go, oh, wow, that's really interesting. It's really no different than saying, oh, do you know Reese Witherspoon? Oh, yeah, she played Legally Blonde. There's like one staple, there's one thing. Oh, this actress, they passed away. They were best known for their role in blank. These are all such great examples of like these unique one-liners. These, like, they're literally just one sentence, and automatically it just snaps into gear for people. They're like, oh yeah, that person. That stuff is so powerful. And it just made me reflect and think on what's mine. And that's a question that a lot of other people are going to have too about, I'm new to this. I'm still building my credibility. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know that many people. I don't go to conferences. I don't have all these titles and, credibility things to my name. I don't know anyone. Like, believe me, I've been there. Oh my God, I've been there. I really, really do understand that there is kind of this pressure to create lemonade when you don't have any lemons. How do you get a one-liner like that? What do you have to do in order to make something like that? This dilemma is really, really, if you follow me for like my book-oriented stuff, this conundrum is so similar to like the chicken and the egg thing. Do I write a book to gain a following, or do I need a following to write a book, right? It's like the same thing. Do I need to have something already happen to me to make that unique one-liner, unique value proposition thing? Or do I need that to attract people? Like, that was a little clunky, but you know what I'm saying. It's almost like that one sentence, that one-liner is like the proof, it's just a one-sentence proof line. A lot of people who go to school, like college, let's say, I'll use an MBA as an example because I'm more business-oriented. A lot of people get MBAs not necessarily for the degree itself, but because of the connections of the people that are in that room and of the opportunities that are available as a result of those different people that you're orienting yourself around. The MBA is just proof that you were in the room. Just like if you were writing a book. I wrote this book and it became a Wall Street Journal bestseller or something like that. That label is just proof that you sold a lot of copies or that it sold well enough to get that kind of title. So I don't have the clearest answer for something like that because I myself am still figuring this out. I literally just had this idea this morning, remembered enough of it to jot it down on a piece of paper, which is what I'm referring to, and relaying it to you now. So this is something that's probably going to be like an ongoing, continuous, unfolding type thing. But there's 3 ways that I'm kind of thinking about what makes sense for developing a unique one-liner like that if you're someone who maybe doesn't have something like that yet. So here's those 3 options. You can buy your way in, you can know your way in, and you can work your way in. Buying your way in is pretty self-explanatory. I know people who have a lot of cash to spare, maybe they just are someone who grew up wealthy, maybe there's someone who does really, really well with business, but they can pay top tier prices to get into these rooms at, conferences or something, at special events. They can afford the VIP ticket, to get a little bit more of a foot in the door with some of the people that are in those rooms, in those special VIP rooms behind the velvet rope. So that's one example. People who know their way in. Basically, this is kind of playing off of that phrase of it's not what you know, it's who you know. And this is very, very true for jobs, for example. Just if you're a traditional Joe trying to get a job, a lot of times most jobs are filled through word of mouth, not necessarily through job boards. There's all kinds of statistics out there about that kind of thing. It's not necessarily what you know, but who you know. Word of mouth, referrals, recommendations, all that stuff is super, super, super powerful. And there's a reason why it is, especially in the marketing context, because people like getting advice, answers, and insight from people that they already like, know, and trust. It just makes it that much more trustworthy. They trust them, and that's the key word here. And thirdly, there's working your way in. It's just working your fingers to the bone to get yourself just a little bit closer, depending on, I don't know anything about you. This depends on what niche you're in, what your goals are, what your needs are, kind of where you're oriented in life. This may or may not work, depending on kind of what you do. But if you're someone who is like a nose to the grindstone kind of person, this is something that might be more applicable to you. Maybe you're a first generation college student and you just had to work your butt off to get that degree. I'm just using that as an example. In the case of this video, I'm actually going to zero in a little bit more in on that second option, which is knowing your way in, capitalizing and leveraging the people that you know in your network. It's not meant to be transactional. I promise you it's not. It is meant to be reciprocal. It's all about sharing an experience with people that you orient yourself around or people that you want to be more oriented around. So here's how I'm going to break this down when it comes to knowing your way in. Who, what, and proof. My fingers did something weird when I was counting that off, but who, what, and proof. I'm going to explain what those mean. Who? Who are you surrounded by? What does that say about you? And proof. How can you prove those things? How can you prove that you know those people? And how can you prove that that's what that says about you? That's why those little one-liner sentences or descriptors or titles or credibility or experiential things in life, I mean, those are all really great examples of what proof can look like. It doesn't necessarily have to be letters or numbers after your name. They could be endorsements. They could be testimonials. They could be recommendations. They could be reviews. It could be literally anything under the sun. In fact, there was I think it was like a clip or something on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, and it's one of those guys who goes around with like a phone microphone interviewing like the ultra wealthy who have like nice cars and asking them, oh, what is it that you do for a living? And there was one guy, I literally just saw this like a day or two ago. This one guy, rich, older, white guy, silver fox, he's like surrounded by security. And this guy's trying to like nudge his way in and be like, hey, can I interview you just for 1 minute? Security's like pushing him off. And this guy said, hey, you know what? I think you might have interviewed a friend of mine. What did he do? He told security to back off, to let this guy in to interview him for 1 minute. I'm telling you, who do you know? Who do you want to know? There's some statistic out there that's like you're just 5 or 6 or 7 connections away from meeting someone special, a celebrity, a thought leader, You are the average of the top, 3 to 5 people that you hang around with. And the hardest part, I completely acknowledge this, the hardest part is finding a community that resonates with you, that feels like you, that's a couple notches above, especially where you want to be. That's where a lot of that growth can happen. That's where mentorship can happen. That's where collaborations can happen. I can't even tell you, really, I have learned the importance of networking and community in the past year, especially because so many referrals of mine have come from people that are more successful than me, a little bit richer than me, and know a lot more than me. A lot of my referrals have been coming from them. Referrals, partnerships, and even revenue shares. Seriously, it's getting in the room with those people to better like, know, and trust you. And a lot of those rooms, a lot of the access to those VIP doors come from gradually building up the quality of your network. How that happens, it's going to vary for everyone. Try out different rooms, see what the culture, what the collective is like. If it resonates with you, follow that breadcrumb. It doesn't necessarily have to be the guy at the top right off the bat. Seriously, it's just one person, one connection at a time. Sometimes the best way to do it is to just do it. Sometimes it's not always going to be super quick. It's not always going to be instant gratification. And in my opinion, I'm of the belief that slow and steady wins the race. I would rather these connections and networking be slower and more intentional and more meaningful and last just a little bit longer, because my fear is that if that relationship building happens a little too quickly, there's the risk of it feeling a little transactional, and you definitely don't want that. It's all about seeing the person and then acknowledging what they do or what they can do for you or what you can do for them. It's always about the person. It's always about the relationship. So if you start orienting yourself around these people, what does that start to say around you? You start hanging out with people that are a little more successful, that are doing what you do a little bit better, that are a little bit closer to the spot that you want to be, who are maybe more closer relationship-wise to the people that you want to know, the kind of people, the caliber of people that you want to know. What is that gradually starting to say about you, right? You are the average of the top 3 to 5 people or something that you hang out with. Does that mean that you're hardworking? Does that mean that you're lazy? Does that mean that you are someone who shares similar values? What does that say about the culture that you share? You can even think about it like playing with your neighbors as a kid. If you used to play outside as a kid, I don't know if kids do that anymore. But when I grew up, I had a cul-de-sac full of girls, and my brother was the only boy. There was one other boy roughly his age who lived behind us. But the culture of the neighborhood that I grew up in is that we were all girls. But, we'd go play in the creek. We'd go do chalk cities. It was like, you saw one person outside, the other person would come out, the other person would come out. You'd have a whole little mini block party going on. It's just one basic example of a general culture that I'm sure people at one point or another have felt. So I'm just using that as a shared example. And then lastly, how can you prove something like that? I already gave a couple examples. One of them is a revenue share. One of them is a partnership. One of them is, referrals. Maybe this starts to contribute to your revenue. Maybe this starts to contribute to your quality of services. Maybe this contributes to your reputation, especially when it comes to word of mouth. These are just a few examples, but it's so interesting. It is absolutely insane how much your quality of network matters. And you don't want to need these people when you need them, if that makes any sense. You don't want to need them when you need them. You need them when you don't need them. Okay, so after all is said and done, I've got two big takeaways to just kind of help package up all of this. The first one is that I really, really feel the need to say this because I've seen it a lot. As someone who's been a big observer in their life, I've seen a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff has annoyed me as a result of that. So the biggest first takeaway that I have is that a personal brand is not someone speaking really well about themselves. Oh my God, anything can sound attractive if you're charismatic enough and or funny enough. That's how Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, he was just a really charismatic man, even though he was really scammy. A lot of people can talk really well about nothing. I would rather, and this is generally the pattern that I have had in my life, is that I would rather be so much quieter. But when I have something to say, it actually has substance, it has value, it has meaning. And what's great about writing, about making videos, about podcasting or anything like that is that you can say exactly what you want to say if that's the kind of person that you are. And I fully believe, I don't get too many views on my channel. I mean, I get a couple outliers here and there, but I fully believe that the quality stuff, just if enough people catch it, it'll naturally find its way to the top. It'll naturally bubble up to the top. Somehow, some way, generally speaking, the good stuff always finds a way to get to the top. And the last thing that I'll say is that people pick people before products or services or brands. They see people before they see the thing, the brand, the product, the book, the service, the podcast, the whatever. That's why personal branding, right? And creating a controlled perception for people to scan, quickly read, and instantly understand what it is that you do. That's why that's so important. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is what I convey. These are my values. This is my culture. This is my personality, my tone. All of those things can be communicated in those little one-liners and visual branding as well, right? If you go into my website, well, my website's been a little bit funky right now. I don't know what's going on. I think it's a GoDaddy issue or something. But if you were to go to my website, for example, you'll see a bunch of different colors. You'll see a certain kind of font. You'll get a certain kind of style for, who I'm like, what I do, all that stuff. Even the room that I'm in, right? I've got these like softer, grounded colors. I've got like blues. I got pink. I got, I'm showcasing people's books that I've helped market and, people that I've helped work with. Like, all of this stuff is a really instant way to give people what they want or to play into their curiosities or to just give them a better understanding of who you are and get a conversation going. Whether they're just a regular connection, whether they're a potential client, it's always about the person. In a Western culture especially, that is highly digital, very instant, and heavily branded, right? I think it's really easy to just forget about the basics, like consider the person. It's always the person first. Whenever I look at a camera, even right now, when I'm looking at a camera, I always pretend like I'm just talking to one person. When I write, even when I journal for no one else but myself, I pretend like I'm writing to one person. Anything that I communicate, that I do, that I talk about, I try to put it out there for one person, the tree within the forest, if you will. There can be a general collection, a general audience that you're going for, that you're wanting to attract, a community that you're wanting to belong to, but never forget the individual, and especially the quiet ones. Don't forget the quiet ones. So that's really all I have to say. I hope you found it valuable. If you got something out of this, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps other people find the channel. If you liked it, most likely they'll like it. Otherwise, I think that's all I got. Feel free to share your thoughts below. If you had to write a one-liner for yourself, no matter how prestigious or how simple it is, I would love to hear your thoughts below. So that's all I have. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Take care until then. Bye.